Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
Good for you.
Oh, really?
I'm Josh.
That's how it's going to be, huh?
Yep, I'm Josh.
You know what? Let me tell you something. That is so wrong.
See, is it going to bug you more than it bugs me? That's the big question.
Not at all.
All right, well, good.
Not at all.
All right.
You're just much more, you're very clever and your intellect is higher, in my opinion, than myself.
No.
And you're better read. And I don't know, I think so. And you pronounce things better. Hopefully you can pronounce the director's name of this movie we're going to talk about, because I've been trying all day and I cannot get it.
I've practiced a little bit.
And so the reason why the introduction is so wonky is because Josh thinks he's clever, which he is. And he says to me off podcast as we're getting ready to go into it, you can do the introduction any way you want. Because sometimes I think it's too rote and I like to do strange and wondrous things. And so the result is me doing exactly the way I normally do it and Josh doing what he just did.
Yep.
So bravo, touche, very well executed.
So today we're going to be talking about a film that got Academy Award buzz last year, and that I had not caught up on, but it just came out on Hulu recently, and it is a film by a Nigerian American director writer named Chinonye Chukwu, and it's Clemency. So, starring Alfre Woodard, who was nominated for an Academy Award, correct?
Not for this, no, sir. Not for this. This was one of those films. That's the reason why I suggested watching it and talking about it, because she was the one that most people said got left off the list this last year. She was in a heavy discussion about how, of course, this is also based on hashtag So White, the Academy, and that tag following them around and them proving over and over again that they might deserve that tag, because we talked about this all throughout this last year. My thing is that we have to get to a place where we're making projects, people are making projects where people can be nominated and females can direct and gay men can direct and transgendered people can play themselves in films, and people of color are playing these roles that are traditionally getting Oscar baited because they're out there. Well, if you don't give these people, finger quotes, these opportunities, you can't fault the Academy per se that they're not nominating them. That said, I think the Academy dropped the ball this year. We've talked about this before. There were a ton of people they could have nominated, and deservedly so could have nominated. Aquafina comes right to mind. They could have easily, Sung Gang-ho, easily nominated him from Parasite. And now it's looking like Alfre Woodard. We can discuss it, but I actually think Aldous Hodge is a supporting character in this movie, and I actually think he's the Miss Oscar nomination. So I just revealed all my great information at the beginning of the podcast. But the point is that there are these performances out there and they're not getting recognized, and I can't figure it out other than there is systemic racism in the world.
Well,
that's what it comes down to. When you see these performances, how do they get overlooked if it's not what people say it is?
Yeah. So that's difficult because, I mean, number one, the people making the nominations are mostly older and mostly white. Now they've done, even within the last week or so, they've increased the number of people that they've invited to the Academy to a large amount, and it skews more towards minorities and towards females, I believe, too. So I mean, I don't have numbers in front of me because I didn't know we were going to be getting this deep into this, but yeah, I think that, the Academy is moving in the right direction. But at the same time, I mean, how do you? So for me, I'll try to lay my cards out on the table too. This isn't a movie that I was drawn to necessarily, but after seeing it, I can see the performances were powerful, but from a filmmaking standpoint, I could see the beginnings of a voice for this filmmaker, Chinonye Chukwu, and I am interested to see what she does next. But as far as a cohesive film, I felt like there were some pieces potentially missing. But I know that we've talked about this over and over again, coming from an acting standpoint. The performances in there were serious and deep and powerful, and the actors were living in these characters, and I think that is a huge amount of a film right there. But I'm looking at other stuff, and I saw opportunities, and I saw certain characters didn't feel as realized as others. The Richard Schiff character, we'll get into this, but in this film, Clemency, Richard Schiff plays a lawyer who's helping out Aldous Hodge's character, and it just seemed like his character needed a little bit, like needed another scene or something. But Alfre Woodard's the main character, the warden, and Aldous Hodge and Wendell Pierce, her husband, Alfre Woodard's husband, in this film. I mean, three just standout performances, just amazing. I was bowled over, and that's kind of like my cards on the table. So I kind of want you to bring me back in and tell me, what you felt about these performances. And I think we're circling around a certain thing here, because Alfre Woodard was also in Crooklyn. So we talked about the Five Bloods last week, and we're talking about Clemency this week. And so it's like we've got Delroy Lindo and Alfre Woodard all bringing me to, I'm just going to have to watch Crooklyn, because, these are two amazing performances, and I can't imagine what they did 25 years ago. So yeah, I'm excited about watching Spike Lee's Crooklyn. Aldous Hodge, where did you see him last?
I've seen him where nothing jumped out, and then I looked at his bio and I went, oh yeah. I've seen him a million times. He's in
The Invisible Man.
Oh yeah.
He's the friend.
See? I didn't even put that together.
Yep, he's the friend.
Yeah, I didn't even put that together. Yeah. It's interesting. That makes this performance even that much more stunning, in my opinion, because that guy was so nice.
Yeah.
The guy in The Invisible Man, I felt so bad all that stuff happened to him because he had befriended this person. Well, he's friends with this person. And all of this horrific stuff happens to him and his daughter and, of course, the main character. But he's so nice. It's a pleasure to see a nice character in a movie. Yes, he gets trampled on. Yes, he gets his world torn apart when it comes to this friendship with the lead in that movie. But sometimes it's nice to see a character who's just not involved in the conflict. I know that's counterintuitive to what drama is or what these movies are, because without conflict, it's a documentary. Although that's not necessarily truth either, because there's a lot of conflict in some documentaries, maybe more so than in actual scripted dramas. But it's nice to see somebody who played such a nice guy, and that quality is sort of here in this performance in Clemency. It's sort of there, and it adds to something. So it's nice to see somebody playing a nice guy and then this guy. And they're two entirely different people with sort of the same kind of quality in the back of somewhere deep inside this character. That guy from The Invisible Man exists. And maybe because it's who Aldous Hodge is as a person, but they didn't make him this creepy, scary, vicious killer.
Like a menace.
It wasn't about, he wasn't a menace. He was a man who you needed to figure out what side of the spectrum you fell on in this film. And of course it's a death row film, so there's going to be two sides to this story and this debate. And that's why I don't necessarily feel that bad about opening the show up with such a strong political statement, if that's what you want to call what I said, or maybe just a weak political statement standing on my soapbox protected, because this subject is deep. It's just profound. There's no way to stand on the sideline with this subject. You have to fall on one side or the other. It is not a neutral territorial subject. It's just not. And we kind of stray away from political stuff on this podcast. That might be because you have a technical background in TV and I have a background in acting. So maybe if we were political science majors who also liked films, then maybe we would bring up politics a lot more than we do. That said, there's sometimes you just can't avoid it. So back to Aldous Hodge's performance, there's a quality that I think that the director allowed these actors to pursue. And it's probably the same quality that is bothering you a little bit. She locks that camera down and doesn't move that camera until they're done.
Mm.
She does it at the very end of the film, which we'll get to. She does it twice with him, where he's waiting for the visitor. It's the second time where he's waiting for his visitors to show up and he keeps looking down the thing. It's very subtle, but she never pulls away. And we are constantly talking about directors who cut way too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice for me to see a moment realized to the nth degree, to where you're not pulling away because the audience needs to fill in the blanks or the director doesn't want to spoon feed anything. I don't think the director spoon feeds anything in this film. I think the director, and it's an overused term and I'm aware of it being overused, allows things to breathe. She allows things to just settle. And I've read reviews of this film, which I traditionally don't do before the podcast. I don't know why I did it. I had my opinion about this film. I wasn't confused about how I thought about it. Sometimes when I'm confused about what I'm supposed to be seeing, I'll go and read reviews and try to figure out if somebody agreed with me or disagreed or so forth. Some people thought that this breathing that the director allowed to happen interrupted the narrative. For me, it didn't, because the narrative is clear. In the first 3 minutes of the film, the narrative is clear. This is what we're going to see happen to this next guy. Maybe not as traumatic as it happens to the first guy, because there's a lot of fumbling.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's the strong enough term.
Incompetence, potentially.
Yeah. The doctor cannot find the vein.
It's a paramedic. He's a paramedic. He's not a doctor.
Oh, paramedic. Cannot find the vein to inject this prisoner with the lethal dosage that's going to kill him. And it becomes a thing. And it haunts Alfre Woodard's character throughout the film. Anyway, so we know what the narrative is. We know that we as audience members have to decide what side of this issue we stand on. And most people probably already know how they feel about it going into this film. So for me, to allow the actors to have these nuanced performances based on allowing their performances to breathe was fascinating to me. I don't know how much I would want to see it again, but if you're talking about moment-to-moment work, and if I was ever teaching an acting class, sometimes actors like to barrel through things, and they just get like hyper about things, and they get, over the top, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes you just have to let the moments come, and if they don't come, it's better that they don't come than you force them to come.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was trying to teach an acting class and somebody was trying to force a moment to come, and I would rather the person do nothing than to force a moment to happen. This would be the film that I would show them and say, look, he is taking his time. Even what Richard Schiff does, he is taking his time. And that man is the king of acting choices. He is the king of acting choices.
Yeah.
When he says goodbye to him after that first meeting that they have, and he walks around the glass partition and he puts his one hand up on the glass and then puts his other hand up on the glass, it's a stunning choice. And I think if the director hadn't allowed the actors to do that, that moment might not have happened.
Well, no, I mean, I understand where you're coming from there. And I guess I'm interested in your experiences being in the plays that you've been in, and I'm assuming some acting exercises that you've had where, like you said, you just kind of sit in it and you wait for something to happen, and that is a great tool for tapping into whatever emotions you need to tap into. Now, at a certain point, just by virtue of the production, when you get out on stage in front of an audience, you will have done that homework to be able to harness that emotion. Or maybe that night you don't harness that emotion. Maybe that night it doesn't come and you move on. But either way, it's something that, is it something that you did in practice and in rehearsals, and you're excited to see that in an example in a film? Is that something that attracts you to this, that you look at that and you're like, she's giving them time to do this, but I'm trying to figure out if, I mean, editing is a tool, and editing can change the whole can change the emotion of the viewer, and that's its power. That's the power of film, period. But just deciding when to edit can change our emotions. And I mean, I felt emotions with these characters too. And I think that the longer it takes you have, the more lived in the characters feel. But if you're going to make a movie that's almost 2 hours long, then you have to choose when and where to cut. So I'm still trying to work through that. I feel like, yeah, I do feel like there were scenes that went on long, but being able to see the characters go from one emotion to another within a single scene without a cut it's kind of magic, you know? But they didn't have time for Aldous Hodge to get somebody to go in there with an eyedropper and put some tears in his eyes. Like, those tears actually came from he had no tears in his eyes at the beginning of the scene, and he did have tears in his eyes streaming down his eyes. And that scene with Alfred Woodard at the end, I mean, I'm not gonna get too spoilery right now, but there's a scene with Alfred Woodard at the end, and it's probably the boldest choice in the film as far as the director is concerned, and I think it's the right choice. And because it doesn't really matter anything else in that room, she's who you want to focus on. So I do think that this film is it's interesting, but I think that it's definitely more down your alley than it is down mine so far.
Let me go back to one point. How long the director allows a scene to go on, or if an emotion comes or doesn't come. And you're exactly right. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. And it depends on the writing. That's what the key is for me. That's what the key is, I think, in general, is that if the writing is good, it will come every single night. If you're at the point where you know it, like the Star Spangled Banner, where you just can say it, where it's just wrote. If the words are in you and you know them backwards and forwards and whatever, and they're good words, and it's a interesting scene on the page, I will literally read something and cannot get through it because my eyes are so watered up that I can't see the page anymore because it's so profound, because it's so well written. So that has a lot to do with it. Internal monologue has a lot to do with it as an actor. What you're thinking and feeling at the time has a lot to do with it. That said, if a director, not necessarily the director of this film, and I will spend the rest of my year trying to figure out how to say her name.
You haven't tried yet.
So I am not disrespectful. I'm not going to try, because I tried all day long and I've heard it said, and I just don't have that. I don't have that way to form those sounds in my mouth yet without a lot of practice. It's just who I am. It took me forever to learn Lupita Nyong'o's name. And to this day, I still pause halfway in between it because I don't want to mispronounce it. And that's the best I can do. So if I did mispronounce it, sorry. Because out of respect, I don't want to mispronounce somebody's name. But at the same time, my forming of vowels and consonant sounds is based on a northern parentage and a southern upbringing. So the way I make vowel sounds is different. I'm not trying to rationalize it. It's just the way that it is. Plus, my ear sucks. I cannot hear things like you can. It's weird. You're a musician. I am not. I think that's the difference in our ear. Anyway, the long and the short of that is, if a director allows an actor to live in the moment, breathe in a moment, and it is not bringing truth to the surface, then cut it, edit it, put that eyedropper in his eye, edit it, get me in, get me out. But that first scene with Aldous Hodge, where he's like leaning back and trying to like suck down his emotions, and he's trying to figure out that he's really going to die. He's going to be executed. And it's the first moment that he's really kind of wrapped his brain around it, at least for the audience to see. And there's a moment where he just kind of like cocks his neck back, and you can see the emotion run from the top tip of his hair all the way down his body. It almost shudders his body in a way. If that didn't happen, I would have edited it to where I would have looked at a blank wall so the audience can figure out what to do. I don't know. But that did happen. And that happened because she allowed him the time to do that. So for me, I don't think this movie is an acting exercise. I think this movie is a narrative that is allowing people to see the emotions that were denied a lot of times in movies because we're into telling stories by editing them together.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear from you. What was it that you didn't think worked? Because I'm not saying that she allowed those actors to breathe made the movie better or made the narrative better. I'm saying that it was interesting to see it because we don't normally get to see it. And for me, it added to the narrative because we have seen this narrative hundreds of times now. We have seen people contemplating this issue in lots of films. We have. So why not tell it from the point of view of what does it do to somebody who is a 30, 35 plus year career? She never says how long her career is, but her husband does say 30 years. So I'm assuming
About the same.
they were married out of college. Yeah, give or take. And they started their careers at the same time because they live in the same state. I don't know. Well, the same area. They work in the same area, obviously, because they're married. He does say 30 years. So I'm assuming she's a 30 plus year doing this job. Maybe in the prison system, maybe not as the warden, but she calls herself, she says it's a profession when he makes reference to her job.
Yeah.
And she says it's not a job, it's a profession. So she's been doing it for a long time. So what is the toll that this takes on somebody? And by showing the toll that this last person took on her, well, the last two people, 11 and 12, because this is her 12th execution since she was the warden. By showing us what the toll is on her, we find out what her true feelings of this issue are, or at least what our interpretation of her.
Yeah, I don't think that you do. I mean, I think that for me, at least, she's looking at this as, well, yes, it is a profession, but then the way that she talks about how she interacts with the death row inmates is that, she says she gives them respect and she gives them the capability to live out the rest of their lives as respected humans as opposed to just, less than human or, and I think that at least maybe when she got into this job, when she, became the warden and was responsible for overseeing the executions of these men, and women possibly. I don't know. We've just seen the last two. But when she was responsible for these executions, she may have looked at it like these inmates are going to be executed, whether I like it or not, and somebody's going to be in this job as the warden of this prison. It might as well be me who is going to respect them, who's going to do the best to my ability to give them a proper ending to their life. And I think that you may look at it like something like the military, where it's like, you have your orders and you're part of a whole. There's a whole nother portion of the judicial system that is responsible for putting those inmates there or not putting them there. There is the executive branch, the governor, who has the power to grant clemency to any one of these inmates at any time. And she is there as another piece, another cog of the machine. But if she decides to stop, if she decides to leave, if she decides to give up this position, somebody else will fill that position. And that other person could be detrimental to the prison, could be detrimental to the guards, could be detrimental to the inmates also, to the point where they're like, well, they're going to die anyway. It doesn't really matter whether they get whatever food they want or whether they get a priest or a chaplain to sit with them if they want or not. It doesn't matter if they get to see people or whatever. But so I think that that's how she tries to couch that. And I think that, we see certain people trying to butt up against that, and she stays firm, which is interesting. So if she was, I don't know, if she was completely like against all of this, if she was completely against the death penalty, period, do you think that she would have prevented his son from being there? Don't you think that she would have kind of like given exceptions to people in certain situations? But it didn't seem like she did that at all.
Well, okay, so let me just retract something I was getting ready to say first, because as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, okay, wait, slow down. Maybe this is just how I took it, the filmmaker's opinion of this subject comes across by what the character does. Mm-hmm. Because, and I will answer your question in just a second, because why do we see a couple celebrating their anniversary and it goes haywire because she's in a different place in her mindset at this point. She's not ready to be intimate, not necessarily sexually, although that's presented, but it's your anniversary. Of course you got to like do those kind of things. That's what you do on your anniversary, you know? So why can she not sleep? Why is she having bad dreams? Why is she sleeping on the couch and then being woken up by her husband who moves out on her and then shows up? And the first response to him is, what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, he's going to turn to her and say, I live here.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he said, because she is in a mindset that is separate from her personal life because of the life she leads professionally.
Yeah.
So maybe she is that person that you have presented her to be, which you were just talking about, that she is, if not me, then maybe somebody else who will not treat them with dignity and respect, which is something I think she says 2 or 3 times in the film. And she is just a cog in a machine, which may be true. And she takes her role seriously, her profession seriously. So for me, she could be anti-death penalty and still be a professional who says, no, that's not the rules. Mm-hmm. These are the rules. Have you ever made an exception? No. Will you make an exception? No. But you have to understand, no. I mean, she makes it very clear for the first no that it's going to be no.
Yeah.
But of course, who is the lady who plays the mother of the guy who got killed? She's fantastic too. If you can find her.
Vernie Watson.
I've seen her a million times. She's been working for decades and she's wonderful in this. Maybe because I used to work in the social service field and not even close to the same thing. There were rules and regulations that I hated imposing, finger quotes, on these young people that I thought were wrong and were not wrong, not constructive to what we were trying to do. And there were also rules that I thought were not constructive that I tried to change to make it more conducive to what we were trying to do. I'll give you an example. We had anywhere from 5 to 10 young people in the house at one time, okay? Male or female, depending on how it broke down. And if you worked outside the house, we would have to sometimes get up around 10, 11 o'clock in the evening, put everybody in the van and go pick you up from Wendy's and then drive you all the way back. And then everybody who just had the night off had to get up. If you're already in bed, you had to get up, go out, blah, blah, blah. And the theory was in a traditional family, that's what would happen. And I was like,
no.
If you're talking about a traditional family, if you're talking about a 2-parent family, the father stays at home while the mother goes and picks up. The mother stays at home while the father goes and picks up. Daddy stays at home while dad goes and picks up. Mom goes and picks up while mother stays at home. It's not like you can just like put everybody in a van and go get your kid who's working at Wendy's. So my theory was, okay, that's not a problem, but we have to have the young people who need a ride figure out how to get a ride the majority of the time. And that could be with a friend or a coworker, or earn vouchers, if you will, even though I hated that term vouchers, some kind of golden ticket to where they could say, I couldn't get a ride tonight. I need to take this ride because they did all of their chores that week. They were rewarded for all of the stuff that they did. Okay. So a lot of people didn't like those things, but I was thinking of the give a man a fish, eat for a day, teach a man a fish, he'll eat forever. I was trying to give these young people fishing poles. I didn't like any of that stuff, but I did it because it was my job. Alfre Woodard could have opposing views of the death penalty, but still do her job professionally. My point to bringing all that up was, I think the filmmaker's idea of this subject by how the character reacts to this subject.
Mm-hmm. So the character can have their own personal beliefs, but because they're in that profession, I just think that especially, I think that working in a profession that you are diametrically opposed to has to be difficult. And so, you don't see many civil rights lawyers who are KKK members. You know what I mean? Like it's not like something that, especially, I think that she would be able to do her job whether she agreed with capital punishment or whether she disagreed with capital punishment. But I do think that this film may not necessarily, to me, it did not speak to me in a way that said she believed one way or the other. It did speak to me in a way that said she has marginalized her relationship with her husband because she's trying to protect him. She doesn't want him to see what's in her head. She doesn't want him to go through the things that she's going through. But that's his job. Like, his job as a partner is to experience these things with her and to be the sponge that she can allow to soak up all that excess emotion, and the thing that will allow her to hopefully to level out and to be able to live her life, to live that productive, healthy life. Because one person, it seems like it's impossible for one person to handle all those emotions. And everything that I'm saying about her, as far as the emotions are concerned, also go for Aldous Hodge's character. So, I mean, I think that it's an insane amount of emotion that these characters are having to go through. But Bernadine has a husband there that is willing to listen and is willing to be there, but she doesn't want to have to put him through that. And so, I mean, those scenes between them are very well done. And I think that the anniversary scene was actually, she kind of like shut down when he said that he wanted to retire. I mean, that's when she shut down. And that was his whole, you could say he was buttering her up with the food and the record and the wine and all that stuff. But she can't think of anything else but fulfilling her profession and being there for all the people that she's responsible for. She has an overarching sense of
responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, responsibility and she's accountability. She has so much accountability to all of these people. Even that we haven't talked about him, but the kind of like assistant warden, she's being a mentor to him, and he's gonna go out and get his own. He's gonna be a warden at some other place. And Thomas, I guess, is the character's name, played by Richard Gunn. And so I just feel like she's having to go through all this stuff, and her husband is there, and she's not taking I don't want to say take advantage, but she's not utilizing him as partners should utilize each other. So,
well, the question is, the whole conversation that we're having right now is based on whether or not we could tell what her views were, and they're maybe not that important.
Yeah,
it's not that important. Yeah, it kind of doesn't. But the filmmaker is definitely making a statement, because if she was okay with all of this stuff, then why is she's in so much turmoil the whole entire film? And is it because she did not give that first inmate the dignity he deserved, and so she doesn't want that to happen? Is that what her whole motivation is for the rest of the film, to make sure that this next guy, Anthony Woods, is her whole motivation that she's concerned that she needs to give him dignity and respect when he gets executed? Or is there a bigger picture? Because why is she having so much trouble with sleeping and all the things that we've already talked about that she's having trouble with, if it doesn't bother her on some level? If she did think that this was the right thing to do and this was just her job, then why would she be haunted by it?
Yeah.
Because she's just a cog in a profession, and this, if not her, then somebody else. And I like the idea that you said that she probably kept her job or keeps her job because she can show them respect. And who knows what the next person might do or what the people before her have done. Yeah. And you're right. The Richard Gunn, Thomas Morgan, the character, he is sort of her apprentice, if you will. And he has learned so much from her and how to be in the next one, which adds to the last scene because of her not being able to come out of it in the last scene. Yeah. He takes over and he actually says, call the death at such and such a time, 11:23, whatever it is. So I don't think you make a movie about clemency and death row and capital punishment, without having a feeling about what side of the spectrum you fall on. Yeah. I don't think you make a film like this.
I agree.
I think the filmmaker is showing us, at least from my point of view. And also, I will say this, and I meant to say it earlier, you definitely put on your own feelings in a film too. So I have a certain view, and can you figure it out?
Yeah.
So maybe I'm like projecting that onto people throughout this film and not being objective myself. But I don't think you can make a movie about executions without having a feeling about what side you fall on. I just don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think just from the first scene, I mean, you have infinite possibilities on what you can show as far as a scene of an execution. And they're showing the worst case scenario. Well, maybe not worst, but a really, really bad scenario. I mean, that man suffered till his last breath, and that was due to the state. That was due to the government. The government did that to him. Now, whatever got him into that chair is separate, but he, no person deserves a death like that. So that I think that's the state. That's the first thing we see. That is the opening salvo of this film. So I mean, I think everyone's very clear on the filmmaker's point of view, but the cool thing I thought about this film was that you've got this warden and you've got this inmate, and they're not even at cross purposes with each other, and I don't think that they necessarily hold ill will towards each other. You've got a man who's fighting against the system, and you've got a woman who's upholding her part of the system to the best of her ability. That profession, you could say that maybe by her saying it's a profession instead of being a job, that's a way for her to elevate that as to be more honorable. But ultimately, she doesn't just, I'm assuming there's other inmates there, not just death row inmates. So, I could be wrong, because we only pretty much stay in that one row of inmates there. But still, she has other responsibilities, not just carrying out executions, but so her job, I'm sure, is a lot more nuanced than what we see on screen. But still, that's what haunts her, and that's why she can't sleep, and that's what she has to go through every night. But there's something that keeps her going back, and I like I said, I think that she feels like she fills that role and fills that role better than anybody else could. So it's a difficult position to be in for her, and for him, he's innocent from the beginning. He's professing his innocence from the beginning to spoilers from now on. Spoilers for an hour into this thing. Professing his innocence from the beginning to the end, and the snippets of information that we get about the case seem to be fairly clear cut, that there are huge discrepancies, and the facts of the matter are that our justice system is not perfect, and what happened to him has happened more than once, and so it's a messy thing, and so we're left humanizing that person. We may see that that there may be statistics that say that X number of, or certain percentage of, people who've been put to death in states that have the death penalty were wrongfully accused or were wrongfully put to death. But if that's more than one person, then it seems, or if that's more than 0 people, then that seems like too many. But with our justice system, the way that it's set up, I mean, that it's run by humans, so it's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. She's the head of an imperfect system, and he's a casualty of it. But it's difficult subject matter, and I think that there's nuance in it, but nowadays nuance doesn't really go very far. People want you're evil or you're good, and there's no between. There's nothing in between.
What people? Just people in general want that? No, I don't want that.
Just even George Washington, for example. George Washington had slaves, therefore he is, now we should never say his name ever again. he never did anything good for anybody because he owned slaves. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty extreme.
And that's two separate subjects, though, in my opinion. That's
I
cancel
totally
culture.
agree.
That's
there
different
you go. Yeah,
than
I totally agree.
non-nuanced culture.
Yeah.
That's cancel culture. And I'm not so sure that, well, we can get into it if you want, but the bottom line for me for something like that is that when the pendulum swings to the opposite side, it's going to swing so far to the opposite side until we can get it rectified to where we can get it back into the middle again. So for me personally, I think sometimes you have to tear it down in order to build it back up again. That's me personally. I think that somebody said to me about political correctness, that we are in a world of political correctness, that comedians can no longer joke around the way that they used to be able to joke around because of things like sexual harassment and manipulating women to do sexual things for purposes so they can have professional outcomes. Harvey Weinstein is the example. And because of that, we now are no longer allowed to make jokes about that. And that's too far in the political correctness spectrum, is what they were saying. And I said, okay, if we had, let's just base it on this country alone, okay? If we had 400 years of political correctness where you could not sexually harass a woman to get what you wanted so she could have what she wanted, if we had 400 years of that, then we can go and say, okay, now it's a bit much with the political correctness. We've had how many years of Me Too? A couple? And now it's too much. It's too politically correct. I can't say anything. I can't make a joke about a woman anymore. No, you can't right now until we even the scale. Until then, we do need to topple over statues. We do need to re-examine who we hold as heroes in this country and why we hold them. It doesn't demean the good things that they did, but the discussion should not be, for me personally, should not be, we need to negate all the good things that they did. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this one really horrific thing that happened in our history. Let's focus on that first before you have to remind me that this guy was a good guy too.
Yeah.
Let's have 400 years of discussion of what a horrific thing that they did. And then the scales will be even.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about, yeah, he did do good things too. It is constant that when there is an oppression of a person or people, or groups of people, and the person who's being oppressed is saying, you're oppressing me. Listen to what I'm saying. Hear me. The first statement is, oh, yeah, well, we're trying to do good things too. No, we want you to hear us. We want you to hear that you can't tell that little boy he can't wear a skirt because you're uncomfortable with it. Not that he's going to get himself beat up. Not that you're uncomfortable with that. Let the little boy wear the skirt. You getting comfortable with it is not that little boy's responsibility. If that little girl wants to wear a fake mustache because deep down inside she's transgendered and she cannot relate to the world that she's been brought into other than wearing a little fake mustache, and you're uncomfortable with it, that's on you, not her or him. Let him wear the mustache. Call him him. And when you do that for that person's lifetime, then you can say you're starting to feel uncomfortable about it. It's always immediately into the wrong discussion with these topics. I have had a life of people misunderstanding who I am based on how they think I should be. And I don't want to be anything other than who I am, but I'm not responsible to make you see me for who I am. I'm not responsible because you don't understand that I like Kiss and I like U2 and I like rock and roll, and that's not traditionally what a gay man likes. That's not my responsibility to explain it to you. Not you as in Josh, just you as in second person, anybody. I mean, I've been called homo dyslexic. I've been called closeted heterosexual, all because you don't understand that not all gay guys exhibit the same behavior. And because you're not comfortable with it, and you need me to wear pink and high platform shoes and dress in drag in order for you to understand that I'm a gay man, that's on you, not me. You figure it out. And when you figure out who you are, come talk to me.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you're kind of saying, I mean, you're kind of saying what we started talking about was that nuance. I mean, like, you're a fully formed human being. There's nuance to your being, to your actions and to your opinions. And you've developed that over your whole lifetime. So you're not going to fit into a box very tightly. So that's the same with anybody. But I think, especially, I really do think that it's social media has codified people into factions, because they have to be able to represent themselves in small snippets of either a picture or a sentence, and that is what they're defined by, and that it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think anybody can be tied down to that, to that singular of a thing, whether you do one thing or don't do another thing, or whether, I mean, just the fact that, if you are part of one, whatever political party, you have to agree with everything that is in that political party, or vice versa. It just, there's no room for, to me, there's no room for analytical thought and for case by case determination. It's, oh, you think this, therefore you think that. And I think we're moving farther to each side, and nobody's willing to just sit down and actually engage in an individual one-on-one. It's just, oh, you're part of that group, I'm part of this group, therefore I hate you, you hate me, and we'll move on. It's not a way to interact.
We've always done this. In human existence, we've always taken somebody we think is lesser than us to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. If we make fun of that person, then we feel better about ourselves because we're not that person.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, because of human nature or because of survival instinct, if you will, we always have to have somebody to put down. It's just part of our world. That's why cafeterias in high schools never change. They are better, and the world is better, but everybody's still scared of middle school. Everybody's still scared of high school. And that's because your category counts in middle school and high school. So instead of coming home and saying, Johnny wore a skirt, and dad and mom say, you know what? Maybe Johnny thinks he's a girl. Maybe Johnny is a girl. Instead of that, we say, there's something wrong with Johnny. Stay away from Johnny. Johnny's scary. So we feel better because we're just as scared and just as confused as Johnny is, but we just have different issues that show it. Second point, back to what I was saying earlier, I personalize what I just said, but I can reverse that conversation and give you an example of what I'm talking about that I've done myself. Meeting somebody who's in a fraternity in college, you immediately think all the way down to the worst case scenario that this guy's willing to date rape somebody by putting a drug in somebody's drink because he's in a fraternity. And that's what fraternity brothers do. Worst case scenario. Fraternities do a lot of great things. They really do. They do a lot of social things. They do a lot of environmental things. They are friends for life. They are fraternity brothers for life. I know somebody who was in a fraternity and he's in his late 40s and he was in some town, flat tire, blah, 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 blah. And he called a fraternity brother he hadn't talked to in 20 plus years. That fraternity brother was there helping him in the middle of the night because that's what fraternity brothers do. So instead of focusing on that, our world focuses on the worst case scenario in the fraternity. Mm-hmm. So when I meet a fraternity guy, I think this guy's going to hate me because I'm who I am. That might be true, but it's no better for me to think that guy's going to hate me.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy might end up sleeping with me. Who knows? I mean, why am I automatically assuming, because I have a preconception of what the world has taught me a fraternity person is, so I'm assuming that. So I cannot go around and say every time I meet somebody who is in a fraternity, they are like this. If they are like this, then I just need to move on.
Yeah.
But if I'm assuming they are, and I'm treating them differently because I'm assuming it, it's a protective, defensive measure on my part to feel better than somebody else because they're lesser than me because they would date rape somebody and I would never do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know that person. I don't know that individual. So I think you're right, but I think it's part of human nature
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think it's a actually good segue from the movie, what we're talking about, because you're talking about nuances in people.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about, I have a friend who once said to me, I am the gayest straight guy you know, and you are the straightest gay guy I know. And at first I was like, what? What are you talking about? And it was a comment on what society thinks he should be because he's heterosexual and what society thinks I should be because I'm homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a chuckle over that because on paper, if you were to see the qualities of these two people, you would assume one was one way and one was another way. But the opposite is true. So I've been fortunate in my life to surround myself karmically or purposefully, or the world has allowed this to happen to me, where I've surrounded myself with, and I've pointed this out in you before, you're a heterosexual white guy who's a Christian, married to a woman. I am not. I am not. So I have been blessed and fortunate to call people into my life who represent for a whole bunch of different ideals. And I don't have to look at a Christian and say, oh, you're going to hate me because of this reason, or you're going to condemn me because of this reason. Because I have Christian after Christian after Christian in my life who walk in the light of the Lord, who I believe that makes them a better person because they've treated me as a better person because of their beliefs. So to immediately assume that is wrong. Whew, I'm tired.
Well, I do think hopefully we can, we'll try to wrap up this little segue, but I do think that social media, I definitely bagged on social media earlier, and I do think that social media has done two very large things. Number one, it has allowed people to find other people who are similar to them, who are not geographically co-located to them, because it may be difficult to find someone who is, I make these little metal models. I've given you some, actually, the Batman models.
Yeah, I got them right
there
here.
You go. See,
Yeah.
So I don't know anybody else that makes those. I literally have never met someone who's made them. But there's a group on Reddit where, we can share different models and ask, advice from each other and all these different things. So I would have never found those people without social media. But at the same time, social media also it causes people to collide with each other that would have never interacted with each other. So that can be a great thing, and that can be an uncomfortable thing. And we are now just bombarded with people who don't agree with us. So we can look at that as an opportunity, and as an opportunity to understand someone who may disagree with us, or who may have a different life experience that got them to this point that's totally different than me, who got me to this point, and we can engage and be civil, or we can just quit and give up and say you're wrong and I'm right and you're bad and I'm good. And I think that it's depressing how many times people just do that second option. So the first option's much more difficult, and it also takes patience on both sides, but I think it's worth it. I think that it changes people.
I agree with you 100%, but I look at it in kind of a different way. People say, well, why wouldn't you unfriend that person because they have such a different political view, or they're showing something that's offensive? Because they have to see my stuff. If I unfriend them, they can't see my stuff. Now, you can
mute people,
keep
now.
yourself active to where they can see you, but for me, personally, I need to know what's out there. I need to know a person who's on my friend list, thinks this way. And then they have to see my stuff. So, I mean, sure, I could have a friend who believes the Confederate flag is a good thing and it's just their heritage, but then they have to see my rainbow flags presented at Pride Month. So, it equals itself out. That said, going back to the film, I think you're right. I think that if I was to make a movie about the subject that we just talked about, I would not want the character to let you know what he or she thought, whether or not they were a Confederate flag flyer or a rainbow flag flyer. I would want the audience to make up their own opinion based on the nuances from the character and from the situation and so forth and so on.
Yep.
And I think that's what this filmmaker has done.
Yeah.
To wrap it back around to what we're talking about. And that's a great thing because look what happened. We're talking about one subject that spawned into 3 other subjects that are obviously both you and I are passionate about because we're living in this life. And you're hoping that the world, from my interpretation of what you just said, you're hoping that the world at least stops for just a split second and listens to the other point of view, regardless. And I am 100% in the same camp. I believe that we are not listening. And I've said that from day one. We just need to listen. And I think I started this tirade with we're not listening. And maybe that's not what this character in this movie, Clemency, needs. Maybe she doesn't need to be heard from her husband. Maybe she just needs her husband to understand this is the world she's in, because she does say to him, I don't want to be touched right now during that one scene. Don't touch me. Don't touch me right now. That's not what I need. I don't need to be comforted. I don't need your interpretation of what you think I need. I need for you to hear that I don't need that. So obviously this was a brilliant movie because it got us all through that. And it sparked all these conversations. We didn't really get to the points of the narrative that you thought were too slow. If you want to take a couple minutes to talk about that, that's fine with me. But
I mean, we did talk through that. I mean, I think that just hearing your explanation on rehearsing and writing and also you saying that, like, if you get there, then leave it in, and if you don't get there, then chop it up, just so we can get to the end of the scene. And they got there. They got there in a full take, and it was arresting. So, I mean, yeah, I'm fine with that. We got to talk about Alfre Woodard at the end. We got to talk about her performance at the end, because we're getting into Captain Phillips here. We're getting into Captain Phillips realm, because
I love that that's what we call it.
It's
what it is.
It is what it is. And just the director, Chinonye Chukwu, she decides to just fix on Bernadine, and we don't see or really hear. All we hear is the beeping of the heart monitor, which I knew was going to be a theme from the first scene, because that's kind of built into us as moviegoers, and it's a known language, so it's good to use that. But at the same time, we know what's happening and when it's happening while we watch her. And she goes into this nether region of emotion, and there's just liquid coming out of all of her face orifices. It's crazy. I think that's a thing, right? Like where your nose kind of, like, I've never seen that before.
Happens to me all the time.
Really? I mean, I've never seen that before on film, I guess I should say. I'm sure I've cried and had that happen to me too, where you're sniffling and all that stuff, you're trying to keep it all in. But I don't, is it one of those examples you think of she's trying not to cry? Like that's the key. Like she's trying to hold it together so much that she's trying to get down and get into this, some sort of like impervious, I'm a stone wall thing, and it just can't be contained.
Yes. When you were a kid, did you ever have that experience where you were crying so much that you lost your breath?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's horrible. And when you're a kid, like, you think you're going to die because you cannot get your breath back. I think this is like the twin of that. This is like the opposite side of that. I think what happens to her, and this could be my interpretation of how I see it, which I guess is everything when it comes to opinions about movies.
That's why we're on here.
Duh. I think a person who's had the experiences that she's had, with the experience that started the film, with the botched execution and the 12 inmates that she's had to witness being executed. And by the way, there's 1,100 people in that jail. She says that at some point in the movie. Got it. So there are other prisoners that she's dealing with. To be able to maintain that professionalism, and to be able to maintain, something's got to give. That's why the relationship with her husband is wobbly right now. That's why she's stone cold to the parents of the victim, because she can't show emotion to them. She has to show, these are the rules. This is the way that it is. The answer is no. It's going to be no. No, I never did it. No, I'm not going to do it. Stop asking me. Move on. At a certain point, when you're going through a trauma, in my opinion, you just sometimes just want to give up, and you don't want to deal with the trauma or the drama or the conflict anymore. So you just give up and walk away because the stress of it is too much to deal with. Well, she couldn't do that because she's in the middle of it and she needed to see it to the end. And at that moment, I think her body and her soul separated, and her soul gave up and is done. And her body reacted to that. I think she got to a point where she was done. She cannot do this anymore. Not the actual physical execution and doing that kind of stuff. Just this world, this feeling that has kept her in this constant state of heightened emotion. You know, when she gets drunk and you're going to have to catch up. I mean, it's an exaggerated moment because she's already had 2 or 3 drinks. She's already completely buzzed. It's an exaggerated emotion because she's in an exaggerated state of mind. And then you have that very almost cliche scene where give me your keys, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's even played in a strange way because she's in a heightened state because she doesn't want to be told by somebody who is she's superior to this person. So at the end of this film, I think it's brilliant that she holds on that shot, because then whatever you're feeling as an audience member, you're allowed to interpret it any way you want. If it's her releasing emotions because she had an affection for this inmate, meaning a personal connection, not necessarily anything weird.
Sure.
She does treat him very kind, which she states she does to the inmates, respect and dignity. She is disappointed when his family members don't show up. You can see it on her face. That's why she kind of like walks out and has that conversation and sort of is not as professional on that phone call, and you overhear it. So the bottom line for me is that the director, I thought it was brilliant to hold on it, because then you can interpret it as an audience member any way you want to interpret it. That this is wrong what she's doing. This is wrong what's happening to this man. If that's your opinion about it, it's enough is enough. I'm walking away. I'm shutting down. If that's your opinion about it, or I have a responsibility to this institution, but I've treated this person as with dignity, but yet it's another human being who has no longer have life, and I have respect for life. So now I'm saddened that his life is no longer with us. You can have that interpretation of it. You can have any interpretation of it. I think that's what bothers most people who didn't like this movie, is that this director does not spoon feed anything to you. She says, here it is. You take from it what you will. Because there are very many films out there that you can only interpret one way, what's on the screen. And the director and the screenwriter want you to interpret it this way. This film doesn't do that. And I think it's brave and I think it's powerful, but you want to hear something interesting? I did not cry.
Interesting.
Not at all. I had more of a cry moment when Anthony, the inmate, didn't have his family members show up.
Yeah.
I had more of a moment with Richard Schiff walking to the car, just subtly walking to the car and seeing the protesters. I had more of a moment when they had that conversation and he goes, I just can't do this anymore. And he's like, oh, you're just giving up. I had more of an emotional reaction to that than I did to the end of the film.
Is it because you were angry?
Maybe. I would say instinctually, no, that would not be the answer.
Okay.
Maybe because I disconnected.
Oh.
Because the subject matter is not anything that I could never do what she does. Ever. Because if it's not clear, let me make it clear. The commandment says, thou shalt not kill. That's what the commandment says. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill, comma, but it says thou shalt not kill. I'll leave it at that. So I disconnected from that moment even before it happened. I was not sure. I was pretty sure that they were not going to grant him clemency. I would have been fine if the movie went that way, actually. I would have been actually a little relieved, but that's for personal reasons. So no, I wouldn't say I was angry. I would say I was disconnected because I already have what my soul tells me this subject is to me.
So I'm interested in seeing what she does next, this writer-director, Chinonye Chukwu. And I'll be I'll be there. Like I said, I did not seek out this film, but I'm glad that you recommended it, because this is a new up and coming filmmaker who's got a few films underneath her belt. She was awarded the Dramatic Grand Jury Prize at Sundance last year, so that's pretty awesome. And actually, she was the first Black woman to win that. So there's only a handful of Black female directors out there right now. I mean, Ava DuVernay is just killing it right now. She's got all kinds of stuff going on. So yeah, but the fact that I can't like come up with, I'm pretty good at, keeping directors' names top of mind, and the fact that I can't come up with a bunch of other ones, that goes back to like what you were saying earlier, where it's a tough game to get into, and if there's people who are, whether it's overtly or covertly preventing you from getting in, then it's difficult to break through. So hopefully the different makeup of the Academy will help to bring different views to the voting, and will help to get more new and innovative films in front of people through the Academy. Because really, like you've said in the past, that's what the Academy Awards are about. They're about, yes, they're about rich people giving statues to each other, but they are also about getting somebody who reads a magazine or watches a TV show, giving them exposure to something they would have never seen. Yorgos Lanthimos' Dogtooth, for example. So
let me just say this. As for a person winning an award at Sundance, it's not without irony that I started this conversation with, if you give people an opportunity and allow people to make movies, then they will be able to win awards. And for her to be the first Black female to win this award does not go unheard by my ears. If the thing about that for me is this, and I swear I'm not getting on a tangent, I swear, is that how many voices have we not heard because of a system that's in place? That's always my thing. Tell me the story. Allow the person to tell the story, and then I will make up whether or not I want to hear it or not. But don't leave it out of history and not tell me it because of whatever reason that you're doing it. I need to know. I need to know who made history in this world. And then I will interpret it my way. Not interpret it, but I will be like, okay, well, that's cool or not cool.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that people were attracted to this film. And another thing that's interesting is that you can't tell if this is a female director or a Black person or a white person or a gay person or a straight person who made this movie. You can't tell at all. You cannot tell. It's because it's not important per se. But if we don't have these voices out here, they will not be able to tell this story in the way that she chose to tell it. But to me, it's not, it doesn't matter that she's female or Black or any of that kind of stuff. What matters is that she was given the opportunity to explore this project, and then it came to me. And now I get to explore all my thoughts and have a process, and then we get to talk about it. That's what's important to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, great. You can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and we'll see you next time.